Greetings once again, loyal listeners. If it's a different take on the goings-on within Euroland that you seek from the dopey and blinkered observations constantly churned out by the mainstream media, you'll find it here, as I provide a running commentary on events at this unique and very special time in economic history. When I last posted an update some 7 months ago, I explained how I had heeded the warning signs from the bond markets and had fled Germany, and in fact the entire Eurozone, for the safer and saner environs of a sunny tax haven beyond the reach of the lunatics who seem hell-bent on bankrupting an entire continent. For all the emergency meetings they've held since the end of last year, for all the predictable, reassuring platitudes delivered after each, they have still yet to do anything to ameliorate this crisis, let alone solve it. They have succeeded in proving only one thing: that reaching meaningful consensus as to how to proceed continues to prove impossible, regardless of how many meetings are called, how urgent they are deemed, or how late into the night they sit. The end result is always the same: deadlock. And as a consequence, yet again the can gets kicked down the road, pressures remain unrelieved, and we shamble into ever more dark and dangerous waters. And please don't be under the illusion that the mooted Eurobonds are a panacea for solving all Europe's troubles. The matter is currently being considered by the German Constitutional Court, but even if they decide in favour of the government, the pooling of sovereign debt envisaged by Brussels will only serve to ensure the peripheral nations are anchored in economic stagnation, not just for a generation or two, but forever. Core Europe needs the peripheral countries to stay on board this sinking ship, because if just one were to leave and go it alone with a new national currency, their eventual success after a short period of initial hardship would spur others on down the same separatist path back to a true and sustainable prosperity. Hence this outcome cannot be allowed and must be prevented at all costs. Those of us who feared hyperinflation as a result of the unprecedented reflationary measures taken by the ECB and various national governments were left scratching our heads as said inflation resolutely refused to materialise. Don't get me wrong though, inflation in Euroland and elsewhere is undoubtedly higher than we're being led to believe. The massaged official figures that tell otherwise are wholly unconvincing. But if the vast liquidity from the ECB's long-term restructuring operation in Europe, in other words the European Central Bank making cheap loans available to national banks so they can buy their own country's sovereign debt, thereby keeping yields down, finds its way into the general circulation, as it will if the banks feel they can get a better return from something other than sovereign bonds, things can quickly and easily get badly out of hand. The situation in the US is curiously similar. I'm no conspiracy theorist, but it's hard not to wonder that what we have seen so far is no more than some sort of elaborate stage setting for the release of a massive wall of money into the general circulation at some yet-to-be-determined future time. Not so far off now, with all the explosively inflationary destabilising consequences that would surely bring. I'm aware that there are those who believe the powers that be are planning to destroy all national currencies so they can bring in one single world currency. Well, this would be an excellent way of laying the ground for just such an operation. Whether you go along with this scenario really depends on the thickness of your tin foil hat. I'm presently reserving judgment on the matter and keeping an open mind. On the subject of the US, you may be forgiven if your perspective is Eurocentric, that everything in America is now wonderful again. This is very far from the case. Attention will return to the dollar immediately after the US elections in November. In particular, we'll be hearing more and more as time goes on about a little something the pundits have labelled a fiscal cliff, which isn't about to go away any time soon. The debt problems in the US remain as bad as ever. It's just that the limelight has been temporarily usurped by the goings-on in the Euro fiasco, which is currently grabbing all the attention. Expect fireworks later this year in the States, as I've warned before. Don't make the mistake of seeking long-term safety in the US dollar. Back in Euroland, the people are now stuck with a wholly unworkable and ultimately unsustainable arrangement, which, thanks to the delays we have seen, will only crash and burn that much more catastrophically than would otherwise have been the case had our leaders' egos not got in the way of everything. The situation as it stands is analogous to a badly designed boiler with no pressure relief valve. This design takes no account of the build-up of internal pressures and makes no allowance for them. It relies solely on the strength of the boiler plate to contain these pressures. Structural faults in the plate material, however, result in faulty containment and risk sudden and catastrophic explosion. This is the situation now with the single currency. It has become a time bomb that urgently needs defusing. To this end, member of the British House of Lords and chairman of the Next clothing chain, Simon Wolfson, set up a prize for anyone who could come up with a safe way of tackling this bomb. One piece of good news following this was that the prize did find a winner. The winning strategy to pull Europe back from the edge is outside the scope of this bulletin, but it's on the net for anyone who cares to read it. I particularly commend it to our august leaders at national and supranational level. Sadly, I can't somehow see them taking the trouble, however. Common sense and pragmatism clearly isn't their forte. It would have been far better at the outset not to magic a single currency block into existence, but rather to strive for the altogether more realistic goal of reducing foreign exchange dealing spreads between various world currencies, so that small firms and individuals could, through some sort of mutual funds pooling system, enjoy the very low transaction costs that banks and large corporate treasuries are able to get within a few basis points at most from interbank rates. Therein, in my view, would lie true beauty and efficiency. But we're stuck instead with a ruling elite whose nefarious plans have no reverse gear, and whose precious egos and dreams of a unified Europe, where the needs and aspirations of the people are even further removed and subordinated to a selfishly crafted, centrally planned agenda. Make no mistake about it. Back in 1999, I predicted all this turmoil would come about. In fact, I shall try to find my original quote from Google's archives and reproduce it here in a future bulletin. I now feel the need to make another more worrying prediction, however. If the powers that be don't pretty soon wake up to the terrible damage they are doing by relentlessly pursuing this foolish course of theirs and take steps instead to defuse the situation, they risk a pan-European war engulfing this continent, because Northern and Southern Europe will be at each other's throats for years to come, and countries like Greece, Spain, Portugal and Italy will be mired in permanent recession indefinitely. This is the bleak future for Europe if our rulers do not very soon embark on an orderly deconstruction of the monster they have created. After all, it is they themselves who will in the end pay the highest price of all for the awful mess they have made of things. 13 years ago, I warned the strains would eventually show, and they are now proving impossible to contain. The prospect that things are about to get a whole lot uglier grows ever closer. One final, more optimistic note. I'd just like to make one more prediction. The combination of a weaker euro versus the pound on the one hand, plus the worst summer in 40 years in the British Isles on the other, will result in a bumper holiday season for Spain this year. There will be some much-needed cash flowing into the costas over the next couple of months. I just hope some of the nastier remarks against British tourists that we've heard from Spanish commenters here don't reach their ears. Spain really needs the money right now, whereas the British can easily go elsewhere for their sunshine. The Spanish should be relieved that their contempt for the British is not widely known outside of Spain and is unlikely to damage tourist numbers. See you all next time.